Man, that was painful. That was ugly. Those of you that are listening or watching the stream on YouTube, if you could in the chat, let me know if the audio is working there because I don't want to do another one of these where you can't see. And those of you listening on Twitter Spaces, if some of you could just type in like a 100 or something, and that way I know that the audio is working there as well. And we'll wait a couple of seconds just for this to show up. I'm going to go over here to YouTube and see if I can hear. Yep, that's working. YouTube live stream is working. And thank you for the 100s in the Twitter Spaces. So everything's working. The audio is working. The only thing not working is Iowa's offensive line. It is shocking to me, surprising, shocking, probably surprising, borderline shocking at how rough it looks. I'm choosing my words carefully as to not be a jerk. And I promise I'm not going to be a jerk to anybody here today. I'm human. Sometimes I can let my emotions get the best of me as I did earlier today on Twitter. Unfair to do that. I apologize to anyone that I offended, not may have offended. I know that I offended some. Trying to do better at that as I get older in life and realize that it's just a sporting event and it should not impact my mood the way that it can and does. Wow. I took some notes in the first half. First quarter, Iowa with 12 yards of offense, 0 first downs, had the ball for 5 minutes and 2 seconds. 3 dropped. I played receiver in high school, all conference, Blackhawk Conference, Central Illinois, small school. I realize that. If you're a receiver and you get both hands on the ball, got to catch that. Not saying the one to Goodson was a well-thrown ball because it wasn't. It was behind him. But 3 drops and 3 punts on 3 possessions. Halftime, 17-0 Wisconsin. I'm sorry, at halftime with 17-0. Blah, blah, blah. It was 17-0 Wisconsin with 7:40 to go in the second quarter. That's what the guy meant to say. Iowa had -1 yards at that point in time. Halftime, 20-0 Wisconsin. Badgers had 192 yards. Iowa had 17 yards on 23 plays and 3 lost fumbles and 4 sacks allowed at that point in time. Burn it, burn it, burn it, burn it. And now I got to pick those things up. The problem is probably were we saying burn it after the Purdue film, after the Purdue game? I mean, yeah, still have what? How many more games does Iowa have left? Iowa's now 6-2, right? 6-2. They still have 4 games to go. Northwestern, Minnesota, Illinois, Nebraska. And man, it's not an overly optimistic feeling right now. For the game, Wisconsin 16 first downs to Iowa's 9. Iowa just 2 of 13 on third downs. Badgers 6 of 16. Total yards, Wisconsin had just 270. Iowa 156. So Iowa actually more than doubled their worst ever offensive yardage production in the Ferentz era, which was at Wisconsin 2017 when they gained 66. So, hey, let's throw a party for that. 24 rushing yards for Iowa, averaged 0.8 yards per carry. 3 turnovers for the Hawkeyes, 0 for the Badgers. So, and I'm going to take several questions. Maybe we'll pull some people up on Twitter Spaces. Going to take several from the text community. You can join the free text line, 515-574-7216. Just send a text, say, add me, and you'll be in. No cost. None of this has any cost. And frankly, I wouldn't want to pay for it today anyway, if it did. Let's start first things first. Offensive line. I know there are going to be a number of Petrus questions, observations, concerns. I get that. But as I said after the Purdue game, if the foundation of your offense is in trouble, you're in trouble. If the foundation of your house has cracks in it, nobody cares what your mums look like on the outside. So first and foremost, the biggest problem the Iowa offense has right now is the lack of progress made by the offensive line, specifically the right side of the offensive line. Iowa started out the day starting Plum at right tackle instead of DeYoung. Well, they quickly brought DeYoung back in. He and Britt really struggled. And I really try to temper my criticisms of college players because this isn't the NFL. And each one of these players chose to come to the football team that each of us roots for and cheers for. So I try to be extra careful along those regards. But it was a bad day for Britt and for DeYoung. I'm not sure how many good days there were along the offensive line, with the exception of Tyler Linderbaum. That might be the best way to say it. Linderbaum, first round NFL draft pick, one of the highest rated centers in college football in years. The rest are struggling mightily, and it's game 8. And when your foundation, the most important part of your offense, there's a reason why one of the oldest and most often used cliches in football is it all starts up front. Things are cliches because they're absolutely true. It all starts up front. And if you are uncomfortable running to one side of your line, or you are uncomfortable as a quarterback with the way that line is struggling to protect you, not just in games, but remember, they take hundreds of reps each week in practice. Spencer Petras knows more than anyone, more than any of us, the challenges that his line has had creating a consistently clean pocket. Petras knows it better than anyone. And I'm telling you that type of inconsistency in the pass protection, not to mention the run protection, we'll talk about that in a bit, but that type of inconsistency in the pass protection, it leaves mental scars. Now, I think that Jake Christensen would have been a better quarterback at Iowa had he had the 02, 03, 04, 08, any number of other offensive lines in front of him, as opposed to the 07 offensive line, which led to him being sacked more than any other quarterback in FBS that year. I think Iowa allowed 48 sacks that year. And over time, it's probably not PTSD, because I don't want to make that comparison, because PTSD is a very, very serious thing. But there's memory. When you don't know that your pocket is going to be clean, or if it is clean, it's going to be short. You don't know from play to play if it's going to be blocked up correctly. It messes with your head. And when you have things mess with your head, it then messes with your feet. And as a quarterback, if you have things messing with your feet, you're dead. You're dead. You got no chance. I think that the inconsistency is absolutely messing with Spencer's head. Now, I don't know that we can even fairly or adequately evaluate Spencer Petras at this juncture because of how inconsistent the offensive line is. That's not to say that I don't think Spencer has shortcomings, because he does. He is not a mobile quarterback. He and Nate Stanley both have been more on the statue side. He does not throw well on the run. That's not something he does well. Kirk Ferentz saying this week at his press conference that Iowa builds their system around the quarterback that they have. So when you have a statuesque quarterback who does not throw well on the run, that kind of takes moving pockets out of the mix, because that's one of the things you'd want to do, is move the pockets when your offensive line is inconsistent at creating a clean pocket. So that's really not a great option, because Petras isn't a guy that can throw on the run. We saw Alex Padilla come in late in the game after Spencer had tweaked looked like he hurt his shoulder, frankly, on the replay. Padilla's first series, he was sacked twice. Second series, he had to scramble, made a really nice throw on the run to Sam Laporta, which turned out to be Iowa's biggest pass play of the day. There was also a dropped pass. Was it third or fourth? It was third or fourth down from Keegan Johnson late too. I mean, the game was over, but it was interesting to see an opportunity to see Alex play. I don't believe that Alex Padilla as quarterback is going to solve Iowa's problems. But I will say this, and please mark this down and remember that John just isn't a stubborn a-hole all the time, because he is some of the times. I know my lane. I know my role. That play where Padilla scrambled and threw on the run, running to his left, which is across his body, that was a nice play. Now, we have a very small sample size here. The Iowa coaching staff has a much larger sample size than what we just saw at the tail end of the game against Wisconsin. So I'm not saying that Padilla is the answer, because the answer doesn't involve Petrus or Padilla. If the answer is, how do we get to Indianapolis, or rather, how does Iowa get to Indianapolis? Man, the farther away I get from actually being in the media, the more I drop the we. I don't like it. If the answer is that, well, the quarterback is not, that's not the medicine, okay? It's the offensive line development that it doesn't look like it's going to happen this year. However, back to the spring when I was doing this, the first spring practice, and thanks to Rob Howe of Hawkeye Nation for editing those videos so that I could see every snap of every quarterback, I said at the time that Padilla, to me, looked like he had a little Drew Tate in him. And those of you that have listened to me for any length of time know that I consider Tate to be the Iowa quarterback gold standard. Not CJB, although he's the most Tate-ish since Tate. Not Brad Banks, and I love Brad. Not Ricky Stanzi. None of them. I have nothing against any of them. I just think, for me, if I could go back through the Ferentz era and pick one quarterback to sort of be the standard-ish, the mold-ish going forward, or any year, it would be Drew Tate. Now, in 2004, Iowa was down to its fifth-string running back in Sam Brownlee. The offensive line was much better than what this year's offensive line was. If in 2004 they were down to their fifth-string running back and they had this offensive line, 2004 Drew Tate season wouldn't have happened. Tate would have been able to make plays, would have been able to extend some plays. I just don't think they would have won the Big Ten like they did in 2004. But being able to move with your legs and throw on the run, if your offensive line isn't where you want it to be, it's a big benefit. Now, again, the coaches see far more things. They see all the reps. They see everything in practice. And there's a reason why Spencer Petrus has been the number one quarterback. And if it's Padilla as the number one quarterback, he still has this line to deal with. He still has defenses coming in run blitzes, crowding the area that the offense can work in 10 yards on the other side of the line of scrimmage, just compacting it like every other Iowa quarterback before him has had to face, because it's not like Iowa's doing a ton of things differently. There are a lot of nuances to the offense. I'm not saying that there aren't. So while I don't think Spencer Petrus is the problem, he's not. The offensive line is the problem. Am I open to the notion, after seeing a very small sample size there at the end of that game, that potentially, given the problems Iowa has with the offensive line, does Padilla maybe give you a better chance to do some things? I'm open to the notion, But I also put a huge asterisk and caveat on that. Two of them. One, this isn't a Spencer Petras problem. Spencer has some physical limitations that when you combine those physical limitations, meaning he's a statue and can't throw in the run, with an offensive line that can't keep you protected consistently, that's not a criticism of Spencer. It's just that, okay, if there is another option that is anywhere in the area code competent, that Padilla's physical gifts could give Iowa a better chance to succeed this year. I'm open to the notion, but folks, I am not hardly by any stretch of the imagination. And this isn't pride talking. This is just being objective and saying, okay, we've got a small sample size here, and Padilla is going to be working behind that same offensive line, so it's not going to go crisp. I'm not expecting 2004 Drew Tate to walk through that door, but I'm open to it. I had a friend text me there when Padilla threw that ball, basically threw it away on 4th down, that Ferentz looked irritated on the sidelines. I didn't see that. I didn't rewind. I didn't rewind to see that interaction, but I don't know. Who knows? I mean, Kirk's sitting there. They're at 6-2, and they've got Northwestern next week. And by the way, those of you that live in the Des Moines area or anywhere near Des Moines, I'm coming up to Des Moines next week at Wellman's Rooftop on West Des Moines Mill Civic Parkway. I'm going to be there watching the game. They invited me to come up, and I'm like, you know what? It's been, 5, 6, 7 years since I've, been up to Des Moines, really, for any stay. Moved away from there in 2013. Haven't done a game watch in Des Moines for a decade or more. So I'm coming up for that. And I'd love to meet as many of you as possible. I sincerely mean that. Because there's not a day that goes by, even though I'm not doing the things that I used to do or doing them with the frequency that I used to do. There's not a day that goes by that I'm not thankful for Iowa fans for the 20-some years of support and helping me do things and achieve dreams that I had set out as a little kid. So I really do mean I look forward to meeting and reacquainting with as many of you as possible. So I hope to see you next week. I'll be there probably about an hour before kickoff. I kickoff 6:30, so I'll be at Wellman's Pub, Mill Civic Parkway, West Des Moines, at 5:30. So hope to see all of you there. I'm not sure if I'm going to wear a mask yet or not. I've got my full shots and all that. But you'll see. If I'm wearing a mask, don't think I'm a freak. Just trying to be safe, careful. But I hope to see many of you. So next week, it's Northwestern. It's at Northwestern. Not exactly a raucous environment. To go. Wisconsin is a raucous environment. If you're Kirk and it's close, again, folks, I'm just hypothetical here. This is all hypothetical. I don't know, don't have the answers. Okay. If you're considering making a change at quarterback, given what's going on with the line and given some of Petrus's physical limitations, if you're considering it, and I'm not saying that Iowa's coaching staff is, at Northwestern isn't necessarily horrible. It's not a great team this year. It's not an intimidating environment. Probably just as many, at least a third of the stadium will probably be Iowa fans. Who knows? Might not be bad. And you wouldn't have the pressure of doing it at home. I don't know. I'm not saying that they do. I'm not saying that they will. I'm just saying that I could see some room for it. All right. Defense today. Defense played well enough to win. Wisconsin scored 27 points. 7 of those were set up by the defense was put in bad situations. They were minus 3 in turnovers, and Wisconsin didn't gain but 270 yards. So I'm not going to – would it have helped to have Riley Moss, Terry Roberts? Sure. Yeah, it would have helped. But the offense, folks, it's the offense. We don't really need to talk about the defense. I tell you what, I've got the Twitter Spaces going here, and I'm going to move my camera over near my microphone so that this can be picked up in the post game. Let me see if I can do something here quick. I'm going to change I'm going to take some calls, if you will. Let's give this a shot. Jabber speak. See if that connects. Looks like it is connected, and let's go ahead and go back to Twitter. If you would like to come on the program, give a comment, ask a question, there's, I think, a button on the lower left where you request to speak, and that's how we're going to do this. Okay, let's see if we can get this working. I've got one right here. It is Jason White. Jason White will be the first person today. Hopefully, this will work via the speaker. Jason, are you there? Hello, Jason. Jason White. Maybe I screwed this up. I can't hear you, Jason. I'm sorry. Don't know what the deal is. Let me go here real quick to my Bluetooth again. Settings, Bluetooth, Jabber speak, device type, speaker, back. Can you talk? Can't you talk? No, that's not working. Let me go. I'm going to try somebody else. This could be a Jason issue. I'm going to go to, I'm a Hawkeye. I'm a Hawkeye. Can you hear me? There you go. You're unmuted. Hello.
Hey, John, can you hear me?
Yes, there we go. So it must have been Jason. Just Jason. Sorry, Jason. Had your chance. Go ahead.
Hey, listen, there's a lot of talk, and I agree, right, about the offensive line, and I see all these tweets of, we want answers. There should be tough questions asked.
Right.
And what do we do at this point? Do you think there is a correction that can be made during this season? And if not, do you think it's realistic we would make a change more schematically going forward in future years if the goal ultimately is to get back to Indy on a somewhat consistent basis?
Well,
thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. You're speaking to something that I've railed against for a number of years. And as I mentioned earlier in the monologue, when I talked about we'll revisit the running game here in a second, let's revisit it right now. All of you know that I'm not a huge fan of Iowa's zone scheme. I feel that, or as frequently as they use it, I'm not a huge fan of it because I feel it's antiquated and I feel teams are really defending it well. Okay. In the second half, Iowa came out and they made an adjustment on offense. Did you see it? They greatly reduced their reliance on the zone blocking scheme, and they went more to straight ahead, hat on hat assignment blocking. And Iowa's running game actually had a pulse. So that would be an adjustment that I would like to see going forward with this offensive line, but that has nothing to do with pass protection. As far as other adjustments or what they can do to get better, I don't know. Because I'm not saying that these guys are at 1999 Iowa offensive line level. You've heard Kirk Ferentz make jokes through the years that he probably should have been persecuted for putting some of those guys out. They were so little, they were getting sand kicked in their face by bullies. Not saying that these guys are at that level, but they're in the neighborhood. So what I'm trying to say is I don't know how much better they're going to get. Can they improve? Yes, but will that improvement be enough to win 10 games? To win the next 4 games? I don't know. I'm not competent after seeing things these last 2 weeks, so I don't know. And I is it worth mentioning that Iowa has a new offensive line coach this year? Tim Polasek was pretty good at it. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't know, but man, I've done too many post-game radio shows and too many post-game podcasts where I've railed on the zone blocking scheme and how teams, especially Wisconsin, have they do a really good job of it. And if you go back and you look at the box scores from earlier this year, even some of the lesser light teams do a good job of it. I really think that's a change that needs to happen. I really think that Iowa needs to run more out of 4 wide receiver sets by emptying the box. You've heard me say that for a million years, but none of that stuff matters because it's just not going to happen. Thank you for coming on. Let's go to Sam. Sam, thanks for requesting to speak. You can unmute yourself. And what is on your mind, Sam? Got to hit the unmute button, Sam. There you go.
Hey, John, can you hear me?
Yep, I got you now. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. My biggest thing is that I have had friends that have played for Iowa football, and the one thing that they told me is that the offense is just asking too much of the quarterback, and it's just so overly complicated. And I mean, is that ever going to change?
Do you have any more detail on what they mean, Sam?
Just with it requires a quarterback to make 4 or 5 reads in a play when it's not the NFL. It's there's a step up between the NFL and college. And I mean,
right.
I don't know. You need to cater to your players' abilities,
right?
And put them in the best position to succeed, and not try to, jam a circular peg into a square hole.
Right. No, that's a really good point, Sam, and it's akin to some things that I've talked about. And I'm not a big fan of Iowa's route trees in their passing game. I'm really not. Never have really been. And from an overcomplication system or thought process, there's multiple times in this game specifically where I was able to, from just watching on my YouTube TV at my computer desk, I was able to see, oh, this is going to be a slant. And it was a slant. And it was the right read because Iowa had one-on-one coverage. And there was one situation where they threw a slant to Keegan Johnson in the second half, where I saw the alignment at snap. I'm like, oh, the slant's there. And then they motioned Tyler Goodson out into the right flat towards Johnson's side, which cleared out even more space. And it worked. It was successful. And Sam, if you're right, those types of plays, the skinny posts, the slants, the quick hitters, that's not complicated. Those are the kinds of things I would like to see Iowa do more of, because if you throw a slant pass with perfect execution, it's nearly impossible to defend unless you're the defensive back and you jump the route. And if you jump the route, the next time it's going to be a Z route. It's going to be inside. It's going to be a post corner. You're going to do the slant towards a post, and then you're going to pivot and you're going to go to the corner, and you're toast. Unless you have safety help over the top, that could go for a touchdown. So, Sam, I'm certainly agreeing with you on the notion that Iowa just needs to simplify it and play pitch and catch as much as possible and go ahead and take those. If a slant's available and you just ran it 2 times, but damn it, run it a 3rd time. Who cares? We're not getting points for style. We're getting points for points. All right, Sam, appreciate you coming on. Really do. Let's go next to Jay. Jay, what is on your mind? Go ahead, Jay.
Well, you kind of hit on what I was thinking earlier about the zone blocking scheme. I kind of feel like they need to go more hat on hat. Goodson obviously had a good run that one time.
Right.
I guess my biggest concern is we're not utilizing our offensive players to their skill sets. Keegan Johnson should be getting way more touches than he's getting. And it just kind of concerns me because I think, he might possibly transfer, since we are in the era of transfers,
Well, we certainly are. Yeah, we certainly are in that era. But I would say, and I don't have the snap counts in front of me. I think it's Jeff, actually. I don't have the snap counts in front of me for this game. I would wager you that this was Keegan's highest snap count game. And I also liked what I saw because we saw Tyrone Tracy playing more inside. He's not an outside X. He should not be the widest, widest, the widest receiver on the field, because he's just not a big guy. And that's nothing against Tyrone Tracy. That would be anybody that is of his stature. He is better suited inside. And Keegan Johnson is the guy that you would have on the outside. So I think Keegan's snap counts were higher today. It sucks that it came in a loss. To me, I think that's a step in the right direction. I do. And we'll see what happens. I appreciate it, Jeff, for coming on. Going up next to Austin here. I really like how this Twitter Spaces works out. Austin, what's on your mind? You got to hit your unmute yourself, Austin. Going once, going twice, Austin. All right, we'll remove from that. Let's go next to, let's see what this person's name is. Hawk 030303. Go ahead. You're up. Yep. You unmuted yourself, but for some reason I can't hear you. All right, let's go next to Brad. Brad is next on the Twitter Spaces. Unmute yourself and fire away, Brad. Go ahead.
Hey, John. There's 2 things that I was curious to ask you about. The one, and you may have talked about it before I joined, was the back-to-back fullback dives. There
No,
that
I
kind
did
of
not. I
kills
did
all the momentum.
Did not talk about that.
And I know Iowa has this thing that we want to be the bullies and we want to out tough you, but when your offensive line is not up to snuff, I don't know why you're trying that. And then the second thing, the game was not on the defense, obviously, but I'm curious. It seems like teams are having a lot of success before Phil makes his adjustments early in the game with their scripts. Like Mertz, he's been horrible, and he was horrible after the scripted plays were done. It's like Phil comes out and they're pretty vanilla, and then he makes his adjustments. But I wonder if there's some wrinkles he could throw in at the beginnings of the game so they wouldn't get down in a hole because the offense is just not made for coming back. So I don't know if you could comment on those two things.
Appreciate it, Brad. Thanks for coming on. First, let's talk about the fullback guys back to back. I tweeted out after that. I'm like, well, I guess you can call that, but I wouldn't, especially with the way that the line's been playing all day. So it was 3rd and 4. You give the pot a bomb on 3rd and 4, which basically means if you're signaling at that place where the ball was in field position on the field and also the score that you're going for it on 4th down. So let's give it to Potabon. Maybe they're expecting a sneakish, but it was 3rd and 4. And Monty gets a few yards. He gets close to it. So Iowa comes out 4th and short. And on the 3rd and 4 play, Wisconsin had brought number 5 down into the A gap on defense. He was right over. Actually, it was just right over the center. They were expecting a sneak, and they gave it to Potabom. He didn't get it. So then Iowa comes out again on 4th down. Wisconsin once again puts number 5 right over center, expecting a sneak. And then Petrus starts to audible. He starts to audible, and that's when Kirk called timeout. So I think they had a sneak call on. And Petrus saw Wisconsin's defender right over Linderbaum and said, no, we're going to change the play. So then they call a timeout, and then they come back, and then they run a fullback dive again, and he doesn't make it. I think that's poor. I think it's poor, really poor. So I would not have done that. Relative to Phil Parker and Iowa's defense going against the script. So think of it this way. All week long, those plays that are in your script are likely getting more reps than the other plays. And they're in your script because you think they're really going to work based upon all the film study that you do. So it's not surprising when the other team does have some success with their script. I can't recall if Wisconsin scored a touchdown on their first drive or not. No, they did not. They did not score a touchdown on their first drive. But think of it this way too. Iowa had 3 turnovers in the first half. Wisconsin, I don't have the full stats today because I didn't ask anybody in the Iowa media for a login because Wisconsin was protecting their. I hate it when these road teams have passwords on their stat services. It's really frustrating and really interesting. And I haven't gotten the official stats yet from the University of Iowa, so I'll keep looking for those. But Wisconsin had some short fields in that first half. Iowa's defense was on the field for another 10 minutes more than the offense was. So it was a 2-1 time of possession advantage. It was like 20 minutes to 10. So I really don't have any things to fault the Iowa defense with. If you want to come on and ask a question or make a comment, you're welcome to. Lower left, I think it says request to be a speaker. Just like this person did. This person's Twitter handle is Hawkeyes Nightly. Go ahead. You are up.
So, John, I'm a little younger than most of the people on here, but I follow the Hawkeyes a lot. So Tyrone Tracy, who going into the season, highly known in the Big Ten, top 15 receiver, you could say. Only 12 receptions are all year. Not much more targets than that. Do you think he thinks of a possibility of transferring after this year back to his hometown in Indianapolis?
I mean, I think a number of the players, in this, given how the transfer portal is and given the transfer rules now, I'm sure that that's going to be something that's a lot more popular. You think back to Tyrone Tracy's freshman year, I think he had nearly 60 targets. And obviously the volume is down a lot this year. One of the reasons why the volume's down is because of what we've been talking about early today and all year long. That is the offensive line is just not, creating a good enough pocket. But I also think that Tracy is in the wrong position on the field. Now, to the Iowa coaching staff's credit, maybe Keegan Johnson in the summer or in August camp wasn't as far along as he is now. I'd almost guarantee you that's the case because he's a young player. There's a lot coming at him. But now that Johnson's there, I really think that they need to move Tracy inside. But I mean, it would never surprise me if an Iowa wide receiver transferred. Go ahead.
And with only one QB commit coming in next year, and the possibility of who the QB is going to be next year, if it'll be Petrus, Padilla, it all depends on how this season really finishes out, I guess. That just was a question of mine.
Yeah, I don't have any doubt that one of Padilla, Hogan, or Petrus, one of those guys probably isn't going to be on Iowa's opening day roster next year. But that, anybody can make that prediction just because of the way the nature is at that position. We are in an NIL world now. So think of this when you're thinking about the increase in transfers. Everybody thinks that they're the guy. There's few guys that are 1 or 2 years into a college football career who thinks that they still can't go somewhere and be a star and make winning contributions. And right now in college sports, time is literally money. Time is money. And if you're on the bench, you're not making plays. And if you're not making plays, Hy-Vee's not calling your name. All right. So that is absolutely a dynamic that we all need to consider. But I will not be shocked if one of those guys leaves because it's just the nature of the position and the nature of the era that we're in. Hey, thanks. I appreciate you listening and thanks for requesting to come on. I'm going to go here to Austin. Austin is next. Go ahead, Austin. Unmute yourself, Austin, and then you can speak. But you got to unmute yourself, Austin. Can't hear you. There you go.
You hear me, John?
Yep, I got you now.
I think a big part of the problem right now is the right side of this offensive line is collapsing.
Yep.
We have to look at it that way. The left side's actually not played that terrible.
Agreed.
There's a lot of communication issues, and there's a lot of different guys moving in and out.
Yeah, I mean, Austin, you're right on the mark. I don't really have too much to add to it because everything you say is true. I mean, today it was painful that Wisconsin was rushing 3, and their defender shot the gap right between DeYoung and Britt, and it's like, I mean. And that was at the point in time in the game where I was getting a little tired of all the Petrus stuff. I'm like, guys, I don't care who it is back there. If you've got stuff like that going on your foundation, there's water filling up your basement. I don't care who it is. So,
and we're 2/3 away of the season right now. If we don't know who works and what doesn't work, we have 3 offensive line guys on this coaching staff,
right?
Between Kirk, Brian, first year Gary. Yeah. I'm not saying they got all the plans. I'm not saying they know everything to put out there, but we have to have an idea of what we want.
Right. No, I appreciate it, Austin. Good thoughts. I agree with you on most all of it. I think Marc Kallenberger retiring from football, that was a surprise. You wouldn't have had 2 new tackles this year. You would have only had 1. I think that is a big thing that's still over these guys. I will also add that this experience that they're getting is invaluable. And next year, the offensive line probably looks quite a bit better. Well, then again, Linderbaum probably won't be around. So who knows? Just when you think you have it figured out, you don't. All right, let's take another call. Dalton, appreciate you coming on. Dalton, what's on your mind? Unmute yourself, please. There you go.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
Just got a simple question. With the defenses being so aggressive against Iowa's run game, would a simple hard count help tame that a little bit?
I think a hard count interspersed absolutely would be a good thing. The hard counts on the road probably a little more challenging to want to work in because you're more likely to get false starts. But yes, hard counts would help loosen things up. But more so than anything, Dalton, in my opinion, and I'm going to turn your mic off, would be the defenses are teeing off because Iowa consistently, predominantly runs outside zone scheme, or they run the zone blocking scheme rather. And yeah, there are counterplays that Iowa has to that, and at times it works great. But man, so often Iowa makes offense harder than I think it needs to be. And I think some of that is because of their high frequency that they use of the zone blocking scheme. Hard counts would certainly be helpful. But at the end of the day, these teams have been watching Iowa's offense play for 20 some years of tape. And you could pull up the tape from 2009, 2010, 2011 and see the same scheme. And again, doesn't mean it can't be successful at times. It's just Iowa sometimes plays left-handed and they do it to themselves, and that's frustrating. I'm going to take one more here, and then I'm going to get to some of the texts from the text group. Tom, go ahead and unmute yourself. And what is on your mind, Tom?
Just to switch up from the offense problems, so to speak, is the defensive line, like, I mean, obviously they're young too, like the offensive line, so to speak, but like, is that a problem too? Like, Graham Mertz had all day that first quarter and looked like a Pro Bowl quarterback, so to speak. Like, no pressure whatsoever. That's 2 weeks in a row. No pressure.
Yeah.
And not to say that the defense wasn't good today, but the defensive line is having a rough go.
Right. And I don't disagree. I called these guys earlier in the year, the no-name defensive line, and I was really, really happily surprised with the productivity that they were getting. But pass rush outside of Van Valkenburg, he's really the only guy that can consistently do it. And he's facing more attention now because of that. I mean, Evans is a fun guy to watch, but he's still little. I mean, he's smaller than Howard Hodges was back in the day. He's quick. He's got a knack, but against Wisconsin, you got to go a long way around to get around those guys. And Evans's best move is an upfield speed rush and turning the corner on these guys. So yeah, Iowa just doesn't have very many dudes this year relative to pass rush. They still allow 270 yards in this game. And honestly, the 27 points is probably more like 17 or 20 when you consider the turnovers. But yeah, it was a rough go. I'm going to go to the community text line. Again, you can sign up for that free at 515-474-7216. And once again, hoping to see many of you in West Des Moines next week for the Northwestern game. It's a 6:30 kick. I'll be there around 5:30 at Wellman's Pub and Rooftop in West Des Moines on Mill Civic Parkway that I think is just west of the interstate there. It's been a while since I've been up there, so getting my directions messed up. Let me go down to these messages, scrolling down to the first ones. Holy smokes. There we go. There's a lot of a lot. Somebody said, John, thanks, but I'm going for a nice bike ride. Todd, that was you. That was smart. Hawkeye Matt says, is Coach Barnett on the hot seat? Coach Barnett being the offensive line coach. I don't know how you can't look there. I don't know how you can't look at that and not wonder, but it's difficult next to impossible for me to put my finger on that and say, yeah, that's what it is. That's for Kirk to know. I'm going to move this phone out of the way now that I don't have to have it for the audio. Thanks again for those of you that came on with that. It's really fun to, for a broadcasting dork like me to sort of have the control now to do my own call-in talk show post-game after the game. It's also a prediction that I made to the general manager of WHO Radio back in around 2007. I said one day, just by using the internet, I'm going to be able to do my own post-game call-in show live. So, thank you. Thanks for making that possible. Tom Becker says, yes, the O-line is bad this year, but the offense is the weak link every year. Well, Tom's not lying. So again, should you hire your son if you can't fire him? I would, and he says, don't consider me a Ferentz hater or a ball watcher and brush off the question this week. I'm a Ferentz and Petras defender, but I just don't think Brian Ferentz would still be around if he wasn't Kirk's son. Explain why I'm wrong. Tom, I'm not going to explain why you're wrong. I'm going to bring something up for you to consider. And I don't think there's a right or wrong here, okay, because I can't possibly know. But I used to preside over a radio program in Des Moines called Sound Off, myself along with the late, great Jim Zabel. And I started doing that show with Jim, I think it was 2004 or 2005, all the way up through 2011. And I did a program on WMT in Eastern Iowa in 03 and maybe 04 called the Golden Harvest Hawkeye Huddle. So I've been doing post-game call-in shows for a long time, and I've taken calls from a number of people. And the most frequent call that I took all the years of doing that was people being critical of Ken O'Keefe. And it was the same over and over and over. And at one point in time, I said, folks, you need to redirect your angst, not at Ken O'Keefe, but at Kirk Ferentz, because Kirk Ferentz is Ken O'Keefe's boss. And ultimately, Kirk's the one to decide. And I made the Occam's razor assessment at that time. Occam's razor being the simplest explanation is often the correct one or the right one. In lieu of Ken O'Keefe not being fired, Kirk Ferentz must be comfortable with what he's doing. So we extended it into Greg Davis. Same thing. We have Brian Ferentz here. Same thing. You're not wrong relative to the offense being the weak link every year. Iowa's offensive statistical profile looks very similar from year to year, and it's typically in the lower third or lower 20% in the nation of all FBS teams. So I'm not saying you're wrong, but I've seen this movie before. Brian Ferentz is running the offense that Kirk is comfortable running. They called a timeout before they ran their second fullback dive. Kirk was right there. They probably all had a conversation. Apparently, Kirk didn't veto that. So I don't think that if his name was Brian Smith, he'd probably still be the offensive coordinator. That's my take. Not saying it's right, not saying it's wrong, but that's just my opinion. Scrolling through some of these. Matt Horan says, hey, John, remember when we were number 2? That was fun. Yes, it was. It was fun. Apparently, Iowa wasn't the second best team in the nation, huh? Who knew? Several questions, several criticisms about Brian Ferentz in this, and I understand all those criticisms. Man, today is mostly Brian Ferentz criticism day in the chat line. Like I would say 4 out of every 5. PFAC 51 on Twitter, also one of Liberty's most famous residents. If Spencer Petras is Iowa's best chance to win, that's an indictment on the football staff for not recruiting better quarterbacks, or is that an indictment? I think, again, I'll react. I don't know that Padilla or Hogan or Petras or Tate or Stanzi or anybody's going to have success consistently behind the offensive line, given the condition that it is in right now, the level of development that they have. And again, I'm not raining down on the kids that are playing the offensive line. They're out there doing their best job. We've all worked at jobs where we were inexperienced. And at the time frame when we were inexperienced, we didn't do as well as we did later when we became experienced at it. It's just that, they're out in front of God and everybody. And this just is the way that it is. Do you place an emphasis? So coming back to recruiting, Padilla can move his feet. Hogan can move his feet. Petras, not so much. Iowa, was it, what's the name of the BYU kid that Iowa, the kid that wound up going to BYU? Is it Wilson? Was it Zach Wilson? I can't remember the name for sure. But I think that kid was coming to Iowa until Petras committed to Iowa and took that scholarship. And that kid is a BYU that's now in the NFL. He can move his feet. So if I was recruiting quarterbacks, I don't mind finding a pro-style passer because I think that works well with Iowa. But I absolutely would place an emphasis on got to find guys that can also move their feet, throw on the run. So again, this isn't ripping Spencer. Spencer is what Spencer is, and he's got some really nice tools in his toolbox. But fleet of foot is not one of them, and throwing on the run is not one of them. And I'm not saying that Iowa gets to pick and choose who they want at quarterback either, because they don't. But man, you got to think you could maybe, get that pro style guy that can also run. Because I think, that would be what I'd say to that. Man, there is over 100 things here, and it's Brian Ferentz. Well, that's the theme here, Brian Ferentz. And a lot of people saying, thank you, I'm going to go outside and enjoy the day. So probably just keep beating a dead horse. I'm going to do something here for those of you watching on the live stream. Pulling a question up from Gabe Reese. We're giving 3 different platforms opportunities to participate in this today. Gage says, how can Iowa not get their athletes the ball in space? Bubbles, jailbreaks, jet sweeps, something. So, and he says, go back and watch Iowa against USC. So today they did run a wide receiver screen. Maybe, I don't know if it was twice, but I know they did once. I'm not saying that you're wrong because they ran it once. They've not really done the jet all that much. They did a reverse today also with Keegan Johnson. And Keegan Johnson, that kid is strong and he has great balance. I don't disagree with you, Gage. They need to do things like that more often, more things like that. I think that's going to wrap it up. About 50 minutes into this. One more time, for those of you that live in the Des Moines area, or if you don't and you want to drive a ways, that's fine too. I'll be at Wellman's Pub and Rooftop in West Des Moines next week for the Iowa Northwestern game. I'll be there about 5:30. Game kicks off at 6:30. Hope to meet as many of you as possible and fist bump and just say hey, and also allow me the opportunity to say thank you as well. So look forward to seeing as many of you as possible as there. I see that the random boner, I just wanted to say that out loud, is listening to this, as is Feltz. I think Feltz lives over on the eastern side of the state. But TRB, I know that you live in the Des Moines area. So get yourself on out there. All right? So no excuses. Well, I'm sure you could have plenty of excuses. I would love to meet you. Dan Welter, if you're out, I don't think Dan's on here, but get out there. All right, folks. Thanks again for tuning in via Twitter, YouTube, or listening to this in podcast form later, even though it wasn't the outcome any of us wanted. And even though at times today on Twitter I acted like a whiny little biatch, apologies for that. I am human after all. But I do enjoy and appreciate when we do come together in post games like this. Even though it's not what we want, it just reminds me that, hey, we're all on the same side. So until next time, and hopefully we'll see many of you next week in West Des Moines. Take care.